Okay. All right. So we've got a few of us. We're expecting a few more to come through. In the meanwhile, I'll get things kicked off. Hello and welcome everybody to our
Hello.
Quarantini happy hour. Thank you for joining us. Cheers, everyone. We need it these days. Okay, so my name is Kalia Garrido. For those of you that I have not met yet, I head up the events and digital marketing and strategy over here at Great Data Minds, and I'm very happy to see everybody's face on the call. About Great Data Minds, a lot of you guys know us by now, I think, but for those of you that don't, we are a collection of passionate data activists. We've got resources, advisors, and subject matter experts along all lines of data, analytics, technology solutions around data and analytics. And in addition to that stellar man and woman power that we've got on the team, we also produce a lot of great data-focused content. So we're talking about events, just like we're doing today, and I'm going to give you a little bit more information about some stuff that's coming up. Podcasts, videos, blogs, newsletters, all the things. So please sign up for our newsletter at greatdataminds.com if you haven't already, so that you never miss any of the cool stuff we're up to. So today we are going to talk about whether or not Hadoop is dead. And this is one of our Quarantini happy hours that we have in our very articulately branded series that is called the Cabin Fever Reliever Program of Virtual Events. All virtual, as you know, because it'd be illegal if it was otherwise. So in addition to these Quarantini happy hours, we also have virtual lunch and learns, in which we're releasing some of our paid content for free, just kind of giving that out as a give back, because we're all just sitting here looking at the computers anyway. And we have a whole lineup of existing virtual events that we had scheduled before we even had to. So we were a little out front of this. I'm just going to say it right there. So our goal overall really is just to keep everybody connected. Admitting a couple more folks into the chat now. So let us do that goal. Let us keep everybody connected. Keep hanging with us. Hop over to our events page. We are at greatdataminds.com/events, and sign yourself up and make sure that we see you on our future happy hours and all the other events. So a little bit of housekeeping as we get started. For today's discussion, we do plan to record this call. So if you would prefer to be incognito, just turn off your camera, change your screen name, and we'll never know who you may or may not be. So that is all technology that's available to you. But somebody who is never incognito is our very special guest moderator today. And this is the infamous Paul Skach. He is a digital data and security specialist at Sirius Computer Solutions. So before he took on that very unassuming title, he spent many a moon at the likes of some of the biggest enterprises that we all know and love, like Hitachi and Hortonworks and Oracle. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us for our Quarantini Relief Happy Hour today.
Thank you, Kalia. So I don't know if I deserve that introduction, but I know some of the folks on the screens here. Cheers. So
Cheers,
one of the things that we've done in the past is if you call out you need to just introduce yourself and what you are drinking this Thursday afternoon. So I'm drinking a Boulevard Tank 7 Farmhouse American Saison, which is delicious. Nice. So and I kind of wanted this. Someone asked me today. I said, this is a panel discussion. And I'm like, well, it is. Just assume everyone's on the panel. So there's no one special on this. Everyone's part of the panel. So feel free to chime in. I'm going to basically poke some questions, and I'm curious to get feedback from the group. What your thoughts are. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. This is just curious about what we're thinking as far as in the feeling. So I've had this discussion with a couple of you over the years, but if I look back, one of the things I like about IT is we never do anything new. We just regurgitate old things. If we go back to the 60s, 70s, when we did, the monolithic mainframes, and then we moved into, emergence of, can I get my notes here? So in the 70s, we had your traditional data warehouses, and then after that, mainframes moved to data warehouses, be it your Oracle, your SQL, your DB2. Then we moved to data warehouse appliances, your Teradata, your Netezza. And then new bright shiny things came out. In our call last week, we talked about trade-offs of a bright shiny new car, but getting it just for the sake of it. And I don't know if there's any validation to curious to some people may have been that bright shiny new car. Just for the sake of getting it, I don't know. But question for the group is, what caused folks to move away from traditional data warehouses, your Oracle, your SQL, your DB2? What drove that move to Hadoop? What was wrong with the data warehouse that we needed to shift? And I'd be curious to get feedback from folks as far as what you saw moving to Hadoop over a traditional data warehouse.
And then just one more note, as you guys, just like Paul said, as everybody goes to answer, please, if you want to share what you're drinking, please do so. Let us know who you are. Let us know what your title is. Let us know what you're up to. And if you are so inclined, we would love to also hear whatever horror stories you've had from this new 100%
yes.
working from home situation that we all find ourselves in.
All right, I'll go first.
Mike Lampa has the floor.
I'm not sure. I'm not shy. So I'm drinking vodka tonic. My incubation thing is walking trails, which is kind of cool. My legs getting in shape. And to your question, Paul, I think it's a combination. It's cost and speed to delivery were the two momentums. Because we were rocking away when Teradata and Informatica were the current shiny objects, but they got slower and more costly than the acceleration of the business. That's my thought.
Okay.
Hey,
Kevin White here.
Sorry, Matt Housley's trying to get in. Can somebody let him in?
Oh, yep, got him in.
Thanks.
Yes, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Kevin White. I'm drinking a white Russian. It's all that's left in the liquor cabinet.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Send help.
Send help, quick. I mean, Paul, I feel like I'm rehashing prior life sales pitch right now, right? I'm envisioning slides talking about the explosion of data and semi-structured and unstructured data, and how do I leverage this to drive AI and ML and better insights and everything else like that. I mean, those were the things that I saw that were driving people to move to newer technologies like Hadoop, and just the cost of relational database to scale and support that just started to get out of control, right? Like those are the big ones that I saw. I'm at Google now. Prior to Google, I was at MapR for 4 years, and prior to that, I was at Oracle. So that's my background.
Okay.
I'll pitch in a little bit. Hi, Jamie Vernon.
Mr. Jamie.
VP of IT at the Results Companies. Drinking a concoction.
Mystery.
Even I'm not really sure what's in it anymore. At least part of the problem is business impatience. Data warehouses, historically, at least the ones I built, were designed to spit out these reports on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis. And then somebody said, well, what if? Well, what if what? What if we have this new data set? What if we want to slice it by this other thing? Well, we'll get the reports guys on that, and we'll have it for you in a couple of weeks. And that didn't fly. And so you needed a database engine that didn't rely so heavily on foreign keys and indexes, the massive disk space that we all saw from denormalization of data sets. Just the ability to respond more quickly to business requests for guidance and insight. It wasn't as much about cost of the stuff it took to stand it up as much as the perceived cost of not being able to answer that question that somebody just thought of, but we need an answer for it right now.
The cost of not getting the insight that you need. Yeah. I love
And
it.
it's an insight that people didn't necessarily see coming. Otherwise, 2 weeks ago, the warehouse guys would have built it for you. But yeah, that's where I see the major shift going to the Hadoops and from the traditional data sets.
Yeah, data has a half-life, right? The answer to that question has a half-life, and if it takes me 2 or 3 weeks to get to it, then that opportunity is lost.
This is Tim Bain, and I've been in data for a while, from privacy to data science. And
What are you drinking?
it's exciting water. It's been a day. But anyway, I agree with what everybody said. Cost was the biggest thing. Although I have to tell you guys, my favorite project that we implemented on Hadoop was a CEO came to us and wanted us to implement Hadoop so he could tell his buddies on the golf course he was running his business on Hadoop. Didn't care if it did anything. He just wanted to say it was on Hadoop. But cost seemed to be the biggest thing that we ran into, was cost and speed to development, or at least that was the promise of it.
Yeah.
And there's the bright shiny toy and the bright shiny car. I've heard someone else mention that it was a resume builder. So
Yes.
We have this, because my staff wants to get the skill set. So let's build it out. And again, all valid points, but anybody else around, what was wrong with traditional data warehouse and that forced us to move to a Hadoop environment?
And I think you look at the 2 data sets that drove the development of MapReduce. So one was for Google, it was scraping the entire web. And then the second was log event data, which is what drove Yahoo to develop the Hadoop framework. And those 2 things fundamentally aren't normalized data sets. They don't have nice keys to utilize, and they're just massive. And so I think when I worked at Overstock, that was a big driver for Hadoop. They wanted to capture web events from in-house logs, and that's why they brought it in.
So when you say log event, does that include the IoT kind of time series data that's flowing constantly?
I would certainly say it does now. Yeah, I think back, early 2000s, maybe people were starting to think about that application. But at least the way I understand the story, everyone was kind of looking at these web servers and all of these logs sitting around, like, what are we going to do with all this stuff? Like, this is a gold mine, and we can't do anything with it.
Cool.
Well, that and like image processing and everything else too. We have unstructured data. I mean, there's a big use case for that. So I remember talking with John King about this. I don't know how many of you know him. He's in the Denver area. I think he was like the 4th install of Hadoop in the world at the time. And he had a gigantic image processing problem at the time. So that's where Hadoop came in. He was looking for something that could just scale out to the problem he had. That was like 2007, I think, or something crazy. So it's like,
and was that all around just like, I need a cost-effective place to drop all this crap?
I think it was just like, I need to be able to process this much data. Like, what do I do? And he came across Hadoop on an IRC forum or something crazy. Yeah, but I mean, it was like brand new from Yahoo at the time. I'd like to get him to talk at this at some point. He'd be one of the best people because he's contributed like tens of thousands of lines to Hadoop as well. So, and he's, like I said, he's a good friend of mine who lives in Denver, but his stories of Hadoop were crazy because it's like he had to use it to solve just a very obscure problem at the time, a problem like nobody really had. So, that was a different use case than I think what we're talking about, but yeah, it's interesting.
Hey, it's Jay Brophy, data scientist.
Hey, Jay.
Hey, everybody. Drinking water, diet, Dr. Pepper. Those are my. Still have some code to write, so I've got to keep clear eyes for a bit here.
What about the bomber curve?
This isn't a driver as much as an enabler, but I think also folks recall the enabler of Hadoop was open source plus the COTS, the commercial off-the-shelf hardware. In other words, we didn't have to go buy Hadoop and the hardware from Oracle or from Teradata. We were able to put together the open source plus the equipment that was more easily or at least possibly cheaper to buy So I'm not saying that that was a driver. In other words, just because that was available, we just Hadoop. I'm saying that those other things that everybody's been talking about were definitely drivers. This was probably a little bit of gasoline that was poured on the fire of the rest of those drivers.
Mm.
Anybody else? Thanks, Jay.
That's a good canvas. Great ideas there and inputs.
So, question for you on with some of those things that, you know, drove us away from data warehouse, looking at, you know, the evolution of mainframes to data warehouses to data warehouse appliances, is a traditional data warehouse still relevant in 2020? And how much does that sit, you know, when we have things like Hadoop and other areas? Do we still have a need for a traditional data warehouse? And if so, why?
What's the difference between like a traditional data warehouse and maybe a more modern data warehouse like Snowflake or like BigQuery?
So my perception, and I could be wrong. Again, there's no right answer here, but it is I call it a cloud data warehouse.
Okay.
Versus a traditional, you know, enterprise on-prem, you know, the very rigor, you know, enterprise versions of the not enterprise, but inflexible, you know, Oracle, SQL, DB2s.
Okay,
But
that makes
someone else
sense.
feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is. Sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, I was just mumbling to myself, going for it. So,
Yeah. So
I'm not even
broke the
drinking
rules
either.
last time. Yeah, I didn't introduce
That's the
myself
problem,
last time
Joe.
either. So I'm Chris Sturdy, and I've been in and around data for a long time, and know probably a good number of the folks on the call here. And I was drinking tea because I got to help with homework later, but clearly I need more of that. But Paul, I think I like your distinction between a traditional data warehouse and a modern data warehouse. I do think there's still a valid reason for the business cases that a traditional data warehouse serves, but I think now more than ever, the cloud data warehouse, especially over the last month or so, shows why you should not be using a traditional data warehouse, because it's got too much care and feeding, too much on-prem pieces, where if you have a major event where you have to not be in your office and you can't have physical access to the hardware and you can't do all the things that you typically did, it gets much, much harder to handle the hardware side of it. But the business need is still there. That's why there's such a big portion of the data warehousing DNA in the cloud data warehouses that Joe mentioned.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Go ahead.
I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. How many of you, when you're at the office, are at the same data closet as your data warehouse? I've worked at global.
Yes, that again.
One of the comments for the traditional model was, we're all working from home now. Nobody can go touch the hardware. So what?
I think another, and this is, by the way, John Dara, work with Google. I'm drinking an Odd 13 Alien IPA. Highly recommend it. I think it's a well taken point. I mean, it's been years since I've physically gone in and touched a computer in a rack. But I think when we talked first about like what the need for Hadoop was in the beginning, this concept of like, well, you can, your data warehouse has gotten so rigid that you can really only do operational reporting on it. It's pretty much just a big reports engine. So we need this new thing here. I think a couple of things have turned out to be really true over time. One, regardless when we talk about multi-structured data, a lot of really important data seems to lend itself to rows and columns, because that seems to be where everyone ends up getting back to. Even in the Hadoop world, people want to process it with SQL. So really, that leaves the problem of how do you handle the unpredictable requests that come in, the what-if requests. And the reason on-prem doesn't lend itself to that is because at the end of the day, you have to buy a set number of servers. Whether those servers are running Hadoop, whether they're running Oracle, it doesn't matter. when those questions come in, you want to be able to very quickly be able to answer them and still serve the needs of the day-to-day business flow. And that's where the cloud data warehouse becomes, it meets both of those needs. So that's what I would kind of add.
Is from a virtual standpoint, is that what you're saying? So from the being able to react to unknown or unforeseen, bursts, is that kind of what you're saying, John?
Yeah, it's the classic, it's the classic, we'll start in the on-prem world. Like if I have a 64 core box and X number of gigabytes of RAM, and a data scientist comes in and says, I want to run this really gnarly query because I think, there's a good prediction I'm going to be able to make that will make us money. And as the DBA, I have to say, well, you can run it on Sunday between 2 and 3 in the morning, because that's when we're not doing our loads, and that's when we're not doing operational reporting. It's an innovation stifler. Whereas if you just say, and to be candid, like, okay, if you have the money to run that query, we can meet the demand.
Okay.
I think the value in the unstructured, the Hadoop model is absolutely in the what if analysis, where you ask a question and you get the pretty picture and you go, okay, that'll work, and you either discard it or you keep it. But whether we're talking about computers or cars, data warehouses are purpose built. Anytime you have an opportunity to say purpose built and say this is what it does, it's going to be faster and more reliable. And I know Craig Skelly's just shaking his head at me saying, no, we've beaten all that. But part of the value in the traditional data warehouse is, even if the senior leadership has changed, even if you had a turnover of the CFO, we all know what it means when the data dictionary changes, when the ETL rules have to shift a little bit. And the fact that the data warehouse has been what it has been and has delivered the financial, the operational reports for so long, and we know that this value in this column has this meaning because we trust the data sets from whence they came. We trust the engine that munged them. You have to go through a lot of the anxiety of, validation, revalidation, and scratching people behind the ears if you're going to change the format of that report, if you're going to change the source of that report, if you're going to change the color scheme of that report. Because wait, this is what I saw last week. Help me feel better. And unless you're in a very nimble organization, and I mean nimble, where each individual is relatively nimble, then part of the value in the data warehouse is it's what has it always been. It's this monolithic thing that never changes, and that's okay. It's a touchstone. We in technology are accused of embracing change maybe a little bit too regularly, and that means that when people who accuse us of that, they don't like change all that much, and we have to be able to respect that.
Okay.
I would actually tend to agree with a lot of those points, and I would say that's a lot of the reason that Hadoop ultimately wandered back to being more like a data warehouse. It started out as this like freeform data lake, and then eventually you had tools like Hive and Spark SQL, where you were basically back to doing data warehouse type queries, but maybe with somewhat more scale.
Yeah. Yeah, it started out as a staging area. Replaced Oracle and SQL Server for your staging area before you load it into Teradata.
Although what we're seeing now, at least Matt and I, we're seeing almost back to the future in a way, right? Like we're starting to see the Hadoop data lakes being replaced by cloud data warehouses for structured data. It's almost comical in a way.
So old is new is old. Yes.
Yeah, all the disciplines and principles are coming back. It's like, oh shit.
Yeah, I mean, this happens all the time right now.
Well, and I would say ultimately it turned out that traditional data warehouse and on-prem Hadoop shared a core problem, and that was a lack of scalability. So if I design my Hadoop cluster with 100 nodes and the next week I need 1,000 nodes, too bad. I can wait till next year when my budget comes in. And in fact, I've seen it multiple times where say a Teradata customer is like up against a deadline. They're like, oh, we got to buy a new Teradata cluster because this one is totally out of capacity and it's going to kill us in Q4. And in the cloud data warehouse, you don't have that problem. Even with the somewhat less flexible options like Redshift, you can scale it out within a couple of hours and have a lot of capacity.
Yeah.
Well, I think one example we did recently with a customer was, what was it? How long would it take a job in Teradata to run? And we brought that down to a fraction of that time and pennies on the dollar for it. What was it, Matt?
Trying to remember, it was a couple of hour job, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
Got
crazy.
it down to a few minutes.
But to balance that though, once you go cloud, you gotta be diligent about
yes.
your
Yeah,
cycles,
cost
right?
cost can get out of control quickly. if you don't
Infinite
watch it.
capacity, infinite cost.
So on that topic, next question is, why did people move off Hadoop? So those that were on Hadoop, and that was the end all be all, and that was my new, saving grace for all of my data as I moved things from a traditional data warehouse into Hadoop. Why did we move off? What was the motivation or driver for that?
I'm just going to throw out all the incubation of software that came out underneath that, leveraging that whole groundswell.
Yeah, I think I agree. It was the cost of maintenance, and it changed every couple of weeks, and then you had to upgrade all over the place, and trying to find skill sets to handle that maintenance was ridiculous.
But it served its purpose, right?
Very much so.
Oh my God, it served a purpose. Yeah, it opened our eyes up. But
I think it's
underneath that, all these guys, at MIT and all the other colleges that are doing their theses, they were coming out with software products that they had built as a part of their thesis, and they turned it into products. And they were killer freaking products, and they augmented those products with machine learning underneath it. And that was real cool.
So someone mentioned this is, the server sprawl. Did that impact the moving away? When the benefit was a bunch of COTS hardware, but now I ended up with 100 servers, and I thought I was getting away from that. Did that have any impact to anybody, customers or individuals on the call?
I think my perspective, Paul, is, and you probably, you, me, and Kevin had a front row seat for a lot of this. There was quite a few customers that never got through the trough of disillusionment when it came to, they were very excited. We'd get 10 nodes out there, 20 nodes, 50 nodes. It was extremely hard to find people who were skilled and could get stuff done. 6 months, a year, 18 months down the road, they still have, people haven't pushed their first use case to production. And a lot of that is because it is hard to manage, a 50 node cluster on premise. It's a lot. You got to have people that know operating systems really well, know networking and hardware very well, and can program and know distributed programming really well. I know Hadoop hides some of that, doesn't hide all of it. And people just found out that they had lots of staff and were spending lots of money, and they really weren't getting much done. And I think that's where a lot of the excitement for Hadoop, or whatever you want to call it, open source distributed computing, kind of waned.
So Bob last week brought up a great analogy, and I'm a big analogy guy. Those that know me probably get frustrated by it, but analogy wise, he brought up. He said, I was in the guitar shop, and the sales rep, played it beautifully. It was awesome. I got it home, and it didn't work the way that. I think the guitar's broken, and I wish I had that analogy back in my Hadoop days, because that was a interesting. Again, we had people that were killing it, but then we had folks that were just struggling with it. And it's, the tools, the skills, the training impacted how much value you got out of that, piece of technology.
Well, let me ask you this, by a show of hands, how many of you have seen companies spend at least $1 million a year on big data salaries for a team to manage Hadoop? I've definitely seen that.
Lots.
These are not huge companies. These are not like $100 billion a year companies. These are much smaller than that. And so when you start to look at the costs of the team, it's suddenly Hadoop isn't so cheap anymore. And these were companies running Cloudera too. We're not talking like just raw open source. Even Cloudera is really hard to manage.
But that was a step change, right? It was like, we're all in on Hadoop. and we're going to build it in-house. And right behind it was like cloud kind of caught on.
Yes.
Like, oh, wait a minute. Really? So I could provision clusters and shut them down?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I think that was the big thing, right? Like people got used to what it meant to like spin up and spin down a server. One of my very large financial services customers that I was supporting when I was at MapR prior to Google got so frustrated with the amount of time it would take to bring hardware in. Like the process to procure new boxes was like 3 months. So like you'd agree on a project and everyone would sit around and do nothing because you didn't have the space to go to do something. More people just started figuring out like, does this really need Hadoop? Can I look at other solutions? Does BigQuery, does Snowflake, like do those kind of tools handle that? Is there an easier, I mean, it's time to value, just now leveraging the cloud infrastructure instead of the Hadoop technology in the front end. And you might still leverage Hadoop, but do you need all the maintenance and the cost of procuring the hardware and going through all that overhead when I can just spend a few grand and get what I need and prove the value, and then I'll shut it down, which is a lot cheaper than spending a couple $1,000,000 on however many servers, right?
But I have to say, I think Elastic MapReduce was a big revelation for a lot of people because suddenly you didn't have to worry about installing software anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a beautiful inflection point, right? All of us kind of like, holy shit, what's going on around us?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I think, and anyone at Cloudera would probably agree, I'm sure MapR would agree, like, we were late to adopting cloud native functionality. And I don't work there anymore, but Cloudera was late. And yeah, I mean, fast and easy trumps feature rich and, maybe a little less expensive every time. Even if you can build it less expensively on-prem, it's going to take longer, it's going to be harder. It's just, at the end of the day, the headwinds just get too big.
Jamie, I'm going to call out on you as far as, why did people move? Why do you think people moved off Hadoop? Why did you see, both existing, your space moving back to shit? Because you've been more traditional data warehouse than the bright shiny toy. Why did you stick with it, and why are people getting benefits of sticking back to that? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was. That's okay.
There you go.
It's a very forgiving audience. I think that in a lot of very specific applications, we talked about image processing earlier. There's a great case for an unstructured data set that's better processed in a NoSQL, Hadoop or MapR sort of model. I think part of it is that in a lot of businesses, the need for what they saw as data-driven analytics still came down to, well, put it in the data warehouse. Partly because of trust, partly because, I think it was John that said it. Far too many people still think in terms of rows and columns.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have this thing that we've invested in. You've got some CIO who's used to watching P's and L's and saying, well, we've got this big thing that we've invested in. Can't we just fold it in there and increase our cost of operating it by a little bit as opposed to building this new thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think happened, my experience was consistent across the entire industry of the entire world, is that a lot of your unstructured data sets, a lot of your Hadoop clusters, they were used for point solutions. They were used for creating a more structured data set. And then folding that as a data source into the traditional warehouse so it could be munged with the traditional data sets. We talk all the time about how, we went to the moon and we took 9 pictures, and we have teenage girls who go to the bathroom and take 20. The value isn't in each picture. The value is in the metadata that a 16-year-old girl with this type of iPhone was at this restaurant at this location at this time in that dress by that manufacturer. So there's your map R. We've already reduced the data set. We've created that demographic profile or whatever is of interest. And then we feed that into the data warehouse and what to do. I suspect that was a far more common model than we would want to acknowledge, simply because of how people already approached solving a problem. You know, in IT operations, we saw this, where you see, you know, digital native companies like Netflix exploded in revenue, but not in employees, because you're already used to using automation for a lot of their change and patching and other things. Whereas at the exact same time, the same year, other more established companies were throwing people at it. So unless you've got a startup, and I suspect that Snowflake maybe is going to be doing this internally, they're going to be using the new technology to do the business part of being Snowflake. But I bet you a lot of their customers are using this really cool technology for point solutions. But whether emotional investment or financial investment are still doing a lot of their reporting and decision making based off of new data set into old data warehouse. My 2 cents. I believe in emotional and enterprise inertia.
You know, I'm going to layer down on top of that, because I agree with a lot of what you said, Jamie. The warehouses that we built were not built to enable the ongoing discovery and exploration that data scientists. You know, I'm being categorical about this. We built these data warehouses for finance, for the most part, right? As a fundamental start. So we were really terse on, is this a meaningful data element we ought to bring in? You know, and data scientists, they're looking for shit that we haven't ever thought about. And then they look at the content inside there and they have to turn it into an array of quantifiable things from a qualitative thing, right? We didn't do that shit. And some of these newer technologies allow you to do that. Just layer down, push the stuff in, and then enable the scientists to pull it out and create their little data arrays and feed their models. And I'm sharing that because that is the new table stakes. Visualization, yeah, we'll have to keep doing visualization and reporting, but the new table stakes is driving towards these models that help us understand where we should go next.
So
I'll be topical. Think, you know, I'm watching the stats every day on CNN, right? It's like, these guys are trying to build models as quickly as they can.
Finally.
So here's a way to think about this, because I've read about this in the context of patent law. Technology evolves so quickly that an object, an idea comes out of patent law well after it's obsolete. Didn't used to be the case. The cotton gin was around for a really long time. But the primary challenge that we all have as technologists is not that the technology can't operate at scale, but the business isn't set up to benefit at scale.
Wow, that's a good nice.
Yeah, I talked to a bank a couple of months ago that was exactly why they got off Hadoop, is they didn't need it. It wasn't, they're still operating in rows and columns, and unstructured was something that they just weren't ready for. They admitted it, and there wasn't a point in continuing down the path until they were somewhat ready for that, if ever.
But someone mentioned, you know, how many companies we know that spend millions of dollars, I think it was Matt, on, you know, staff and folks. At what point does technical debt come into play? I've invested this much, I got to keep going. We've already got people that are trained up. Where does that jump off point become challenging when we've put so much, we've invested so much in training? You know, where does that become difficult for companies?
And some of the people, it's just Tim again, some of the people I've talked to, that's becoming less of an issue because technology is changing so fast that they know that they're going to have to change anyway. So moving off of this and onto something else, while there is some technical debt, they'd rather achieve that and move a different direction than continue marching down the same road and getting further behind because they know it's going to change so fast.
So they've got this embrace change. Actually, bring it on, change culture, right?
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more of that in some of the organizations I've talked to, because a couple of the banks that we've talked to recently, they're still operating a lot of stuff on mainframe, freaking out because their entire mainframe staff is retiring in the next 3 years and they don't know what to do. So they'd rather not deal with that in the future.
I was thinking about, bringing out my ISAM and VSAM and COBOL books.
They're paying really well.
Well, and on top of that, one of the things that I've seen, Skirty, you and I have had conversations on this over the years on, it's a challenge of getting data in, data out. And so a lot of my proprietary tools, I had to go get extra proprietary tools to get a data in or get a data out, as opposed to other types of applications out there. So Hadoop became, it was purpose built. And so, the questions I wanted to ask, I had to do a little more heavy lifting than I was used to, because the products that I had in the past didn't quite work or needed to be modified. So I'm curious if that's relevant to customers you've seen or experiences in your own accounts.
I think it's similar to the things that Michael and Jamie both said, right? That organizational inertia, and I never wanted to hold on to that data before, and so I never had it in the old tools, and so you're fighting against the inertia and the technical debt there. And so we see that all the time. It's just, we don't have the data. Well, why not? Well, because we just threw it away because we couldn't handle it. So it's just sitting on a file on a NAS somewhere, or sitting out in the cloud somewhere, and we don't even know that it's there. Mm. I see Maverick has also joined us.
Hey, Maverick.
That's awesome.
I usually look like this.
So anybody else, as far as the either the technical debt or the data in, data out being a reason that we moved into Hadoop and now we're moving off of Hadoop? Okay.
I just think it didn't find its. I don't think it found its niche.
Well, I think you guys said it earlier, right? Everybody wanted to still deal with it in rows and columns. So even though it could handle things very, very differently, nobody was ready to get to it. Like your point, Michael, they never found its niche unless you were Yahoo or Google, where you needed to invent it to solve a problem that everybody else didn't have. Not all of us are going out to scrape the entire internet and index it.
Yep. But it did open our eyes.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So Mike, to that point, is here we sit in 2020. Is Hadoop relevant? Is Hadoop dead?
In some use cases, I think it is still relevant in those batch processing, the semi-structure. I mean, there's still a lot of use cases. It still is relevant, but more and more people are moving to like a Snowflake, and it's much easier to operate with. But I don't think Hadoop's going to go away. They're still selling it, and there's still a lot of use cases that it works really, really well for.
I think the question that Hadoop needs to ask itself in navel gazing is not, are there use cases where we are still relevant, but are there use cases where we are uniquely relevant? I mean, if I want just a traditional database, I've got MySQL, I've got Oracle, I've got SQL Server, I got a dozen to pick from. And how do you pick? If you want a NoSQL, if you want something designed for big data or unstructured data, you've got, you've got the Azure platforms, you got the AWS platforms, you got places like Snowflake. How do you pick? So if I'm going to build a beat sheet, where does Hadoop win? Does it win in medical? Does it win in finance? Does it win in social media? In which use cases does it win? Mm-hmm. And you find those places where you win, and then you go hard. I think the opportunity to be the platform of choice is over. I don't think there is a platform of choice. But I think if Hadoop is going to have relevance, you've got to find those uniquely relevant, uniquely well-positioned use cases.
So I'm going to throw a curveball in here. And again, this is not reality, but just curious, kind of as a panel here, you know, hypothetically speaking, and I'm going to come back to a reason why this doesn't make sense, but hypothetically speaking, if you had to pick one, you had one data repository that would fit the majority of your data set challenges, what would you pick? Would it be Hadoop? Would it be traditional data warehouse? Would it be a Spark? Would it be a NoSQL? Would it be an object storage? Or would it be a cloud data warehouse? Which of those would be the thing that I would, in 2020, that I would say, okay, that's going to meet the vast majority. Nothing's going to do 100%. If I had to pick a technology, what technology would I select? I'm going to call on Mr. Bain for his input.
I don't know if you can. I mean, I think.
No. This is a game. You one that's going to pick the most check boxes. There's nothing perfect, but back in the day, everything fit in a data warehouse. So that was the thing. I now have all these different options. What's the one that gets the most check boxes?
I mean, I think SQL Server 2019 is making a step in that direction and moving to more of a, they call it HTAP database, a hybrid analytical transaction processing database or whatever. And it's still a little ways away, but now you've got your ACID compliant transaction system as well as the analytics side of the house all in one single database. Again, I don't think it's quite there yet, but I think that's the direction that you're seeing more things move towards. But again, I think it's hard to pick because it just depends on your use case. Are you doing more analytics? You're doing more transactional
You're not playing
processing.
the game, Tim. You're not playing the game.
Wait, so Microsoft is taking a page out of SAP's HANA book? Is that what you're saying?
Very, very similar to SAP's HANA book.
Okay, interesting.
Very similar.
I'm going to go parochial and say Snowflake.
Well,
definitely the clear answer here.
Tim is dancing around it. I'm going to say it. It's you know, Microsoft may get there, but they're going to have some of the same challenges that HANA had, and they're going to, and we aren't perfect for everything by any stretch of the imagination, but for a majority of the workloads, I do think that a cloud data warehouse, preferably mine, would be the one that I would go with.
And I would agree for data warehousing, but you got to think about other things. He's talking data platform. So does that include the graph database? That include
the graph, and those are the ones that we don't do well, graph and some of those other pieces. That'll change over time, just like Microsoft's story will change over time. The broader data platform, as I look into it, is not just about the real high concurrency transactional stuff or the analytical workload, but the breadth of how can I get data and how can I share data and how can I use other people's data and increase the value in the data that I have inside of my own organization with those external data sets. Those are going to be hard to do in other technologies, and they're relatively easy to do inside of Snowflake. So I look at the platform a little bit differently, and hopefully I don't need a lot of graph.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
From my perspective, if we're talking about analytic workloads, it's about enabling the analytic workloads themselves, right? So getting the content there and getting it, I don't want to say fit for purpose, but I will. Enabling the advanced analytic workloads, because I got to take all that data and I want to turn it into something that I can feed in predictive models. If I'm a business analyst, I want to connect to it from my self-service visualization platforms. I want to be able to scale it. I want to be able to shut it down. I don't want it to be on-prem. So cloud versus as an option, it's cloud versus on-prem, and I think maybe that boomerang will come back at some point. I doubt it. Like the old hosting boomerang did. We hosted everything and then brought it back in. The ability to scale on cloud is incredible, as well as the ability to take advantage of tools that I could move between clouds is very important. But my focus is around, I got this analytic demand workload. I want to enable these diverse use cases very quickly. And so it's not, I can't see one technology platform pulling that off. I think it's going to be a mix.
Mike, you're not playing the game.
I think if there's going to be one technology platform,
clearly you have no ability to enforce the rules.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I think if there's going to be one technology platform for all of my data platform needs, it's either going to be Microsoft or Oracle. Simply because it is as good as Snowflake is about providing a data source for reporting and analytics and munging about in what are scenarios, you still have to worry about applications that provide transactional database support. And you have to be able to ingest quickly and tell me about my Amazon order or my HR intake, whatever it might be. And so the developer is going to be used to writing an application that hits a traditional ODBC data source, however that goes, putting the transaction details in rows and columns. And that speaks to either a SQL Server platform or an Oracle platform. And I think, frankly, if the capabilities don't exist for either of those two, they've got the wallet to go buy a small startup company and fold it in, like Oracle did with MySQL. And I think people would rather be bought by Microsoft right now because everybody thinks that Larry's got enough of Ireland out in the Caribbean. And so I'm going to put my hat with Microsoft.
So
simply because I only get one to pick.
I know. So I'm going to pull in Mr. Dara. And by the way, it's an island off of Hawaii. So he's got his
got the whole island.
Branson has the one in the Caribbean. Larry has the one off the Hawaiian island, which is God knows why.
He's got 95% of it.
What do you say, Dara? What's you've morphed from past lives, current lives. You're seeing from different lens today. What do you say?
If I had to choose one data management platform, it would be object storage. It would be cloud object storage.
Interesting.
I said, years ago that S3 was the killer app that AWS created. I mean, you think about limitless storage, the ability to put anything you want in there, whether it is in rows and columns or not, and then you bring different compute to it. Whether you want to process that with SQL, there's a tool for that. Whether you want to process it with Python, traditional MapReduce. But the key is like getting the data in one place. So if I've only got one tool in my toolbox, it's object storage.
Yeah, but then what about the enablement and the consumption on top of object storage?
Well, I mean, I've got one.
That's where you got the plethora of tools, right?
If I'm playing the game like I think Paul.
He's playing the game.
I got one tool. It's object storage because it's not going to do everything for me, but neither is SQL Server, neither is Oracle, neither is Snowflake. Those are all purpose-built systems. If I need to put a whole lot of data in one place, it's going to be in Cloud Object Store.
Okay.
So let's shift gears a little bit. One of the things that I've personally been frustrated with is the misnomer. Actually, real quick, Mr. Weiniger, what is your? The question is, if you had to between Hadoop, traditional data warehouse, Spark, NoSQL, object storage, and cloud data warehouse, you had one repository to choose, what would you choose if you had of those options?
I mean, unless I was running a small startup, I wouldn't choose just one because they kind of are optimized.
No. You're playing the game here. You're playing the game. We get
redefine the game, man. I mean, why did you invite me?
Okay. So let's pivot.
There's a reason why there's that many choices in the market. So the question is, which ones are in cycle and which ones are coming out of cycle?
Okay. Well, first off, what are you drinking, Mr. Brett?
IPA. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So I always get frustrated by the term data lake. And the data lake, I believe, is a misnomer because it implies there's a single place. There is one place that things go. It is no longer a single place. It is a collection or gathering of repositories. So what are the, of those Hadoop traditional data warehouse?
Cut me off and then tell me what you want my answer to be, or?
No.
That's how he runs meetings.
Only because I love you, Paul. We need some comment.
I was agreeing with you that there is no one, so I'm giving you the first shot at what are your, if you had three between Hadoop, traditional data warehouse, Spark, NoSQL, object storage, cloud data warehouse, what would those be if you had three to choose from?
Yeah, it's all about the proximity to compute and what you need to compute. And so I think your answer varies based on the needs of the business and how much the business actually understands what they want out of the data. I mean, to John's point, if you're going to blindly do it, then yeah, put it all in an object store. Maybe you get what you need out of it. Maybe you don't. You're not going to know what you don't know. So if you don't get anything out of it, then, you're not going to know anyway. So, a lot of this requires, some pretty in-depth domain knowledge about where is the business at, how do they actually operate, what processes are relevant to them, what ontologies are relevant to that business, and from a maturity standpoint and even a data product management standpoint, where are they at? So the big thing about this whole data science movement is about really producing data products, mostly for process automation. So if you answer like which one is the best, I don't think you're going to get a coherent answer. The question is which one's most relevant to the business, and I think that's why you see so many choices. I think the other thing to think about is what's going to happen when 5G creates all this machine data, and everybody says that they have the most perfect, AI ops solution that's going to parse out all these logs and tell you what's happening with all these different machines. I'd say Hadoop is probably one of the most versatile, but not necessarily the easiest to use. I don't know if that answers your question, Paul, but
it does. So Skirty, I'm going to give you a out card. So you're not proprietary on what pays your mortgage. What would be the other two that you would add to your selfish snowflake conversation?
It's always about me, Paul. What were my other choices?
You got Hadoop, you got traditional data warehouse, you got Spark, you got NoSQL, you got object storage, or the Snowflake cloud data warehouse.
Well, we already said that, we already uncovered my bias on the first one, but I would go with object storage because, as Mr. Dar was pointing out, that gives us the most flexibility for the unknown use cases, right? Because as everybody pointed out, there's the purpose-built pieces are great for the purposes that they were built for. But if I'm looking for future-proofing myself or trying to anticipate other use cases that I can't foresee yet, object storage has got my vote.
Okay. Tim, if you had to add a second to your Microsoft.
I think I agree with the object store just because between the 5G and all the different unstructured and image processing in the healthcare business, and there's just a lot of possibilities with the object store that's out there for analytics and for data going forward.
So why isn't object storage getting a other than the S3s of the world, the blob storage, why isn't it getting the traction? Why isn't it being? Is it not sexy enough? What's the reason it's not getting, talk in the communities? Is it not marketed well?
Because people don't interact with objects. They need a vehicle into those ones and zeros.
Yeah, it's too low level.
From the same problem. Yeah, exactly. It's suffering from the same problem Hadoop suffered from. It's too hard to make it too hard to make it do what you want it to do. You have ultimate flexibility, but unless you have the smart people in the room that can do that, it's basically data sitting out there that 90% of your people can't touch.
Here's the truth though, like coming from a Cloudera perspective, S3, ADLS, and GCS siphoned away more of my business than anything else, because that's all that matters is where the data is, and then you bring what you need to bring over the top of it. And it was so much more cost effective. I mean, we would, I'm not there anymore. Cloudera would, until they finally kind of had a story to tell around object store, we would talk about, we're going to run HDFS on, a persistent disk or ephemeral disk, and it was just a terrible story. I mean, it didn't hold up at all to what the cloud vendors could offer. And so that's the reason I say it is a killer app. Yeah, it's by itself, it's not that much, but you can bring so much to bear on top of that it's an amazing technology. And it, by the way, completely ripped apart this notion of bring your data and your compute to one place. They have to be co-located together in the same 2-unit racks, 2U server. No, you don't. Not if you've got fiber everywhere and your latencies are next to nothing. And then suddenly you have the flexibility to do all the good things that happen in the cloud, which is scale up, scale down. Can't do that if you've got your data and compute.
But scale up, scale down doesn't impact like the value of the data, right? That's a mechanism for optimizing cost and optimizing operations. It's not actually a method for you could say indirectly it is, but it's not a method for getting value out of the data that you
I would argue that it is, because a lot of companies couldn't afford a 1,000-node Hadoop cluster to process a petabyte. And if they want to process petabyte, then they have to just scale it out temporarily.
Yeah, that's fair. But even when they process that petabyte, allegedly process that petabyte, they actually can't see the whole domain that they're looking at. So it's segmented. So there's limitations with that. It's not like because they can more cheaply store it, that petabyte of data, it doesn't necessarily mean they get access to all of it. They get access to it in segments, right?
At the end of the day, if we're not enabling analytic insight generation that's creating value, then
that's right.
I can find the coolest technology to store data and let it lay there.
Yeah.
So on object, is it from a on-prem versus a cloud version? What gives me the most bang for my buck, or what gives me the most value to my business? We keep saying S3, but S3 is a cloud version. So
I think it's yes, but I realize I'm biased here, but I think if you're talking, object store on-prem, first of all, it's it puts you back into the same places as open source Hadoop on-prem. You got to manage it yourself. You got to figure it all out, and you still have
procure it.
You got to procure something. If you truly want flexibility, it just unless you're Bank of America or Verizon, and you can build out to that level of scale because you actually have data problems that big, on-prem it's a tough one.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And does any discussions around from a security standpoint, the perception of or access to in the cloud, have we removed all those barriers? Are those still just the warm fuzzy? We have server huggers. I mean, does that help us having on-prem
I found your new T-shirt, Paul.
I don't think all those questions have been answered, because if they were, then I don't think we would keep answering them for every single customer we're talking to. So everybody's still concerned about it and has to be reassured about it. But I think we're slowly making progress there.
Categorically, I think it's a red herring, but I agree. You got to convince these CIOs and CTOs.
I also agree it's a red herring. It might be the biggest red herring we found.
Great.
What's that, Joe?
I just said it's the red herring to end all red herrings.
How so?
Everyone brings it up. Oh, it's not secure, or something else they make up, and then you go chasing that for the 50th time. I think everyone's been there. So
I think the major challenge for cloud versus on-prem is because people who talk about, these sorts of data sets, the what if analyses, they're already in the short horizon time frame. They're thinking, how do we respond to this in 3, 6, 9 months? Mm-hmm. No matter what the cloud service is, whether it's infrastructure or it's an application, even including the staff and the data center costs and the power and the carrier and the whatever else, it's cheaper to run a VM on-prem over a 3-year period if you're doing enough of it. A single VM is very expensive. 500 in a data center, it's actually cheaper than putting that same workload, the same operating systems, the same amount of disk off in Azure, AWS, or whatever else. The challenge is people go, well, are we going to be doing this for 3 years? I don't know that we are. It'd probably be cheaper over the short term to run this in the cloud. And then they come back next quarter, well, we're still using it, but we're not sure about the value. We're going to keep on running in the cloud. And then 3 years later, their cash flows have been such where they would have been better off keeping it in-house.
I think a lot of that is because companies approach the cloud as they would on-prem and don't really think of operating in a cloud native sort of way. So I totally agree. I mean, when you look at the cost per cost, it's like definitely if you're running a server 24/7, 365 days a year, of course it's going to be more expensive, but it's really not like a good practice in the cloud typically. So,
no, it's not. And so if you have flex workloads, you have burst traffic. I mean, think about, say, 1-800, I'm in the customer care space. 1-800-Flowers. They have massive call volume the week of leading up to Valentine's Day, leading up to week of Mother's Day. Some steady volume as people decorate their houses for the holiday season around Christmas. And then it's like a trickle. The trickle is their steady state business. They got to keep that in-house. It's going to be like 20 people tops. The burst traffic, they should send off to an outsourcer. On-prem versus cloud. It's why lots of people have accounting firms versus having an in-house. Like I don't need an accountant year-round and for my household finances. I need them for like a couple days, around March. So I have a firm. I have an outsource. It's the same model whether it's professional services or managed services or cloud infrastructure. And Brett thinks I'm hilarious. Surge traffic should be for cloud. Flex traffic should be for cloud. But steady state load almost always plays out better cash flows if you keep it on-prem.
Yeah, so how do you orchestrate that though?
Well, you can have this application be the one that we keep on-prem. You can have the data set with a short lifespan be what you put off in cloud, depending. We talk about Black Friday. Why is it Black Friday? Because that's when a lot of your big box retailers go in the black. Wait, now it's Black Monday. Wait, now it's Black Thanksgiving. No. So everybody's got surge. So you can be flexible, you can be creative, you can create business value by looking at technology that supports the business and saying, because the business surge is here, the technology stack that surge is here, should be moved off. And maybe you can't get away with it, but I think that is a more aligned way to approach cloud versus on-prem. It's not the security stuff, like Joe said. Security's been solved. You know, we have major global corporations that put all sorts of sensitive stuff off in the cloud. It's different. It's not inherently secure. Just because it's an AWS or Snowflake, it doesn't mean that you automatically put it in some sort of magic lockbox. You still have to do stuff.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. So curious, next question, and then we'll have kind of a, you know, roundup is, what's the next unicorn? What's going to be the next thing that comes out? They're like, oh man, you know, where'd that come from? You know, several years ago, there was a Apache project in Hadoop called LLAP. And there's a reason you don't let developers name things. And Brett's laughing because he knows what it is.
I'm laughing at Kevin's expression.
Live long and process. And I'm like, it's going to be the next thing, and it never went anywhere.
Kevin, you got to say something. Hold on, Paul. Kevin's got to say something.
Kevin, go ahead, Kevin. No,
just
come on, Kevin.
crack it open, dude.
I hate every part of this conversation because every other week there's the next unicorn and what it is. Like at the end of the day, to me, it's just taking all the complexity in this crazy tech world that we have and simplifying it. And the people that do that are the ones that are going to win. I think it's all auto ML from here on out. So like Hive LLAP got killed by Spark. Like in my estimation, like go tell me something that's like, anyways, but like people can't afford to spend $250K a year on data scientists. So how do you just simplify the process for which AI and ML is applied? That to me is the unicorn. How you define what a unicorn is in today's age, that's up to you. But I'm having like flashbacks, Paul, and it's like
get it out there. I love it.
Well, Kevin, actually on that note, it was interesting. Matt and I today were speaking with one of our clients. It's a very large e-commerce operation, and they so the head of data, who's not that technical, ran an ML model, auto ML model in Google Cloud using auto ML tables, and was able to come up with a fraud detection model that was simply awesome, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's pretty badass. I've worked in the auto ML space for years too, and it's a hard problem to solve, but it's the vision's always been there. It's just too damn complicated and it's expensive. Let's solve it. I think we're getting there.
I think so too. I mean, obviously at Google, that's a big push for us, but that like up-leveling this conversation to me, like Hadoop, when I sold it, was all about like cheap storage. Like, how do I make an overly complicated thing sound really simple? Super cheap. Put your data here, which is why S3 came in and was like, hi guys, look how cheap I can make this. And then the other carrot was like, but how do you get ML and AI? And you got to have the data in here so you can do all this stuff. And it's like, so that's the other side of the equation. There's still going to be reasons for like batch data processing and like huge number crunching, depending on like maybe the things that are Hadoop specific, credit card companies, banking, the internet, like Yahoo, Google, etc. But at the end of the day, it's like we were solving for AI and ML, and we were solving for cheap storage were like the primary drivers, at least that I saw for Hadoop. And yes, the SQL piece was like, oh, if I create the data lake, that's why the snowflakes and the big queries are kind of fitting in the middle. But I don't know. I think it's all auto ML for the next couple of years, and where people are really going to see the value from the data that they have. But sorry, too much. I'm wondering.
Right,
no. I appreciate it. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, Matt and I started our company because we realized, like, well, we jokingly call ourselves recovering data scientists because we felt like the data science piece inevitably became a data engineering and data pipelining discussion.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could see like AutoML is I think the ideal, and I think the other unicorn is probably going to be magic pipelines that make it data automatically useful for AutoML. Like, and it just removes human intervention, because right now the dirty work, as everybody knows, is the pipelining piece. It sucks, and then data cleansing,
sausage making
stuff. Yeah, if you can figure out a way to magicify that piece, that's a world I want to live in.
But there's two layers of that pipeline. There's one that brings it from the sources and does some level of rationalizing and harmonizing. But the next piece, and that's the the augmented, I'll say, is feeding in these models, right? Taking all this stuff that's just business data and turning it into data that an analytic model can digest. And then, and I've seen a couple platforms where it's like, this is what I want to predict. You figure out for me the independent variables that are going to feed it, right? I love that stuff.
So I didn't mean to set Kevin up on that, but I'm kind of entertained by his reaction. And again, we've had conversations that it is not the marketing ploy, the next new bright shiny toy. But it's funny. I heard from a executive years ago. He said the number one frustration for IT executives is airplane marketing companies, airplane advertising marketing companies. So as they sit in their seat and they look at this and they go, "Oh, maybe I should look at this," and they go back to their folks. And again, what's the next thing that they're going to read in the magazine that they come back to their IT folks and go, "What about this?" And that's what I'm trying to find is what are we hearing and how do we either embrace that or dispel that? Because it's coming. Marketing people are they're not getting out. Airplane travel has slowed down a little bit, so hopefully that dispels that. But they're still doing Google searches and reading their online stuff. So anything that we think is coming down the pipe. I mean, one of the ones that what does quantum computing do to this? As this hits a whole nother spectrum, is that, again, I don't know. Don't want to throw any gas in the fire, but what's going to be something that disrupts what we're doing right now? Curious.
I mean, machine learning and AI is going to go down a path, and the way we're approaching a lot of that is still going to be static. When you start taking a look at those as dynamical systems, then you're going to have a group of hardcore engineers that do that. But to Kevin's point, it's not going to be practical. The underlying piece underneath of that that's going to push forward is dynamical systems on graph, because graph will get you a more accurate answer for a domain that they're looking in. And that accuracy at some point will matter over speed. So you'll go through your speed layer first to get the fastest responses possible. And then you'll come back through another layer possibly where you can get a more precise answer than what you got through your speed layer. And then you'll come back to graph as kind of your definitive authoritative answer to kind of anchor things. And then you'll have another set of processes that have to retrograde back to go fix whatever was determined in your speed layer. But I mean, essentially all you're doing is arbitraging accuracy as you go through based on the fastest way that it can be presented. Like the core of that, I think will hit, but what are we going to call it and how's that going to happen? To Kevin's point, for most people, it's going to be like, hell, I don't care about that. I can't do anything with that. You have a core group of engineers that'll be able to figure that out. That'll come to market as a product to make it easier because it's going to be too freaking complex. You're going to have maybe, some of the heavy hitters in the Fortune 50, maybe Fortune 100 that want to pay for that and do it their own way because they get their own competitive edge by doing that. But it's not necessarily practical, but I believe that's coming, but how that's going to manifest itself is going to be, it's all going to, that'll all be driven by simplicity, to Kevin's point. So.
Yep.
Simplicity of what? Consumption?
Yeah.
So feedback, was this beneficial? And then anything that you would like to see as for Great Data Minds as we evolve this discussion for topics that would like to be delved into, that you on the front line say, you know what, I'd love to pick the brains of some folks, around topic X. So I guess first question is, was this beneficial? Did we get value out of what we heard today?
I stayed on. Yeah, it was cool.
The first,
very cool.
Yes, thumbs up.
Yeah.
Kevin and John and I haven't talked in years, so that part's great for me. So.
When's the next meeting? It's like What are the 12 steps of Hadoop recovery?
Object store is number 1.
Meeting, Kevin.
Admitting that you need an object store is number 2. Asking forgiveness for Hadoop is number 3.
Oh,
Joe, anything you'd like to see?
I mean,
in future?
I'd like to have a discussion around data lineage, data cataloging, quality, that sort of thing. It's something that we see popping up with all of our customers, either implicitly or very explicitly. It's a major problem. The other piece I'd like to talk about at some point, or I guess the soft parts of data, like how to talk to executives about data. I mean, all of us are coming at it from a technical angle, but what we're finding too is it really doesn't matter if you don't have execs and teams onboarded. You might get sideswiped, or Lord knows what else happens to you. So those kinds
Just
of things
managing data teams and data processes. I mean, it's one thing to have an ETL management tool, but what about the people workflows that go into data?
Yeah, it's a big one that we get asked about a ton. So,
how do you tell a story with that data?
It's cliche, but it's so important.
How to compete with the airline magazines. So how do you get the real, message to them? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're called in a lot by C-level execs to basically help them filter out a lot of like the marketing bullshit they see from vendors, right? That's a big part of our job, actually. So we could have a discussion on that, or some variant of it. It's a real problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, I just want to say thanks for putting this together. Hey, Paul, I just want to say thanks for putting this together, because
thank you.
Much as it's virtual and that's easier to do, it's I know it still takes a lot of work, and whether we all got out of this something that we wanted or not, or thought it was useful, I mean, I appreciate it. So
you have to thank Kalia, because this is her brainchild. This came up probably 4 weeks ago. And we had several meetups, and we're like, okay, these things are now not going to happen. What do we do next? And so I think you coined the Quarantini phrase. I think you, figured out, how do we kind of, set this block and then come up with discussion. And it's been great. This is the 3rd session they've done. Thank you for letting me, humbly trying to be a moderator. So
yeah, you were great. This is awesome. Paul, you're hired.
Great job.
You're hired.
He's hired.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it.
This is awesome.
And do you want to do a little plug on Great Data Minds and what you guys do? Again, for the folks that weren't here early.
Yep. Great Data Minds. We have we have advisors and resources that we can help to staff up data projects. In addition to that, we also do a whole bunch of content creation, discussion. We like to have kind of inflammatory topics just like this, really about all things data modernization. So again, greatdataminds.com, greatdataminds.com/events. If you want to see more stuff that we have going on like this, we've got other Quarantini happy hours coming up. We've got other virtual events. And thank you guys all for joining. This was a really great discussion. And Paul, thank you so much for moderating it. It was wonderful.
It was a pleasure meeting all you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Enjoy your Thursday. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Bye.
Will do. Take care.
Thanks all.